Sup everybody, Kuroda, Rob here. How's it going, guys? So today, as you guys can see by the title of this, we are going to do a tier list of the Super Nintendo, which of course you guys know I love very much. And yeah, I don't know, I've seen a lot of tier lists on a lot of videos that people have done on YouTube, doing various different tier lists of all kinds of things, from food to US presidents to Godzilla Kaiju, all that stuff. But I thought maybe because I am a diehard fan and love the Super Nintendo so much that I would do a tier list. Now, I have one issue. The issue is I cannot find a good enough list of games for a tier list. So this one I have is pretty good. There's some glaring omissions here, notably Final Fantasy II. I don't know why Final Fantasy II isn't on here. There's a couple of other ones that I could think of. I think there's only one Kirby game on here. You know, we're missing quite a few things, so bear that in mind. I did not make this tier list. I could have probably put together one myself, but it would have taken quite a while, and I don't have the time for that. So I'm just going to make this, I'm going to use this pre-existing one that somebody else made, and I'm going to rank some Super Nintendo games, because I know, especially with that top 20 Super NES games that I made, there was a lot of glaring omissions. I understand that, and it was my personal choice, and there were some really big favorites there that really didn't make it. So, and there's a couple that I think I kind of regret not having on that list. The big one for me, especially being Zombies Ate My Neighbors. But I decided I would do this so you guys at least had an idea of where I stand in terms of my personal taste on some of the other games that didn't make the list. And you might find, you know, we'll see how I feel when I do this, but you might find that, you know, my list might be a bit different than you'd think, even if you saw that video. So, without further ado, let's do it. But I want to start out with one little prerequisite here. It's a weird list of games that they kind of came up with here. They have most of the really, really big Super NES games that you can't miss. Final Fantasy II notwithstanding, and also Kirby's Dream Land 3 and a couple of others. But, you know, again, I digress on that. But there's a few here that I put into the bottom category here, which you can see is haven't played. So these are just ones I just did before I even decided to record today. I could briefly go through some of them. Brainlord, always meant to play it. Love Enix games, but I haven't played all of them. Brainlord's definitely one I would like to play. Legend of the Mystical Ninja, that's one I've always meant to play. Super Turrican, never played it. Dragon View, never played it. I don't even know what that one is next to it. Lufia, I've always meant to play the Lufia games, haven't done that yet. The Ignition Factor, never played it. Shadowrun, I might have played a tiny bit of, but I don't really know the game well enough to actually, you know, I think rank it fairly, so I decided not to put that on there. Goof Troop, same deal with that one. I've played a little bit of it, but I didn't think it was right. Same with Harvest Moon. Also, the Chaos Engine, never even heard of that one, to be honest. I think that's Dungeons & Dragons next to it, but it's hard to read. Metal Warriors, never played it. Breath of Fire 2, I've never played. I may put that on this list if Breath of Fire is not on it. I didn't see it, so if it's not on there, I may move that and just count that as the first Breath of Fire, because I've played that one, but I've never played the second one. Phantom 3, I can't read it. I don't know what that game is. Super Smash TV, never played it. Terranigma is the big omission, the big mess up here as far as I'm concerned, as far as games that I haven't played. Believe me, it's on the list. I've been playing a few Enix games, and this is the next one on the list for me. So yeah, Terranigma is one I have to. It's a big hole in my Super NES, you know, just games that I've played for the Super NES. There's a baseball game, didn't really play that. Ogre Battle's another one I've seen footage of that. Same with Terranigma and those other Enix games, but never played it. And I'm also, to be honest, not a big tactical RPG guy, so I don't think... I mean, I'll probably try it because I've heard nothing but good things about Ogre Battle, and I've seen some of it, and it looks good, but I'm not a big tactical RPG guy, so eh. King of Dragoon, I think it's called, never played it. Sparkster, never played it. Skyblazer, never played it. Pocky and Rocky, played a tiny bit. Honestly, I haven't played enough to actually give a proper opinion on it, I think. And I don't even know what the last one is, but I know based on the box art, I haven't played it. So, there's quite a few here, if you look at the full list here, that I haven't played. The rest I have played. at least to some degree, enough to know the game well enough to like it, and to, you know, rank it properly. And like I said, there's some glaring omissions, which we'll talk about, that I'll try to come up with off the top of my head. There's also a distinct lack of puzzle games, which I also don't like. I'm a big puzzle game fan, and there's barely any of those games on there. But I digress on all that stuff again. Without further ado, let's do it. Let's rank the Super Nintendo games. Woo! Okay, so let's start out. So the first game we have here is Robotech. I'm going to give that a C. I have played barely played any Robotech. However, I did watch my best friend in high school play through a lot of this game, and I've played it a bit myself. I'm giving it C tier because it doesn't have that same nostalgia. Well, it has a bit of nostalgia for me, but it doesn't have that impact that other RPGs had at the time. It's also kind of a tactical RPG sort of game. Again, not really my bag, but if you like that kind of thing, I think you'll really like Robotech, because it also incorporates this mechanic where you can customize your own robots, which I think makes it a really cool and unique game. And yeah, I don't know why they never ported this or re-released this or anything, but it's a really cool and solid game. Again, not quite my thing, but I really respect it, and I really like watching my friend play it. But yeah, Robotech, you gotta play that if you haven't played it. Killer Instinct, I'm gonna give a B tier. Killer Instinct is one of my favorite fighting games of all time. It is for the Super Nintendo. For me too, it's probably my favorite fighting game. I'm ass at it, to be quite honest. I'm not very good at it. And I acknowledge everybody says that Killer Instinct sucks and the arcade version is better. I don't doubt that at all, but I think for a console port, it's really good, and I love the pre-rendered graphic style of Killer Instinct. I'm just not very good at it, but it's the whole aesthetic and everything about Killer Instinct I've always loved. So for me, it's B tier. I know, for example, in the video I did, people would have much rather probably had me put Street Fighter 2 or something, or maybe Mortal Kombat on there. But to me, Killer Instinct it's gold. You get it? So we got next Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest. That is S tier as far as I'm concerned. It's by far the greatest Donkey Kong Country game of the franchise. I love the dark tone of the game. It's a game that I've played many, many, many times. It's a game that Rachel and I really love playing. It was sort of a game that we played when we had first started dating, and even like before we got married. So it's got like double nostalgia factor for me. One, being a game that I played all the time as a kid, and two, being one that I played a bunch. But aside from that, I think it's an objectively great game. Probably like one of the greatest soundtracks in a video game in ever, in my opinion. The graphic style is amazing. It's one of the best looking games on the Super NES. I love the darker tone when compared to the other two Donkey Kong Country games for the Super Nintendo. And I even think, I gotta be honest, I think it had the most unique level designs, and it also, you know, you had the added bonus from, I think Diddy and Dixie were the perfect pair, because Donkey Kong and Diddy kind of, the way they played, they were good. It was pretty good in the first game, but Diddy, they kind of expand a little bit on what Diddy can do, especially when you when you incorporate his little tumble there that he does. You can kind of tumble and jump off. I'm really good with playing as Diddy because Rachel always picks Dixie. But also you have, of course, Dixie, who can use that kind of flutter and fly with her ponytail. So I don't know, I just love the way that game controls, and the dark tone to it, and the music. It's perfection. S tier. One of the greatest platform games of all time. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This is where I go against the grain. It's going to be A tier for me. It is my favorite Zelda of all time. It's right up there with Ocarina of Time. It is not one of my favorite it is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. It's in my top 10, but it's not like at the very top like a lot of people want it to be. I know it won the Super NES poll that we did on the channel here. I know a lot of people really love it. It's always at least in the top 2 or 3 spots in lists of the greatest Super NES games ever. But to me, It's great. It deserves all the praise it gets. I think it's objectively as good as people say. I like other games better. And it doesn't have the quite the nostalgia factor for me either, because I didn't play it when I was really young on my Super Nintendo. I didn't play it till later. That being said, it's an amazing game. Awesome top-down Zelda game. Probably the best one of that ilk. And like I said, it's my favorite Zelda too, I would say. Between that and maybe Ocarina of Time. But yeah, awesome dungeons. Love it. Love the Dark World. I love the music. Amazing game. Amazing game. A tier. Totally. We're going to two more of my favorites that I'm just going to go right here. S tier for me is Super Mario RPG. I don't mind saying, as you guys well know, it's my favorite video game of all time. It's my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time. I acknowledge that it's probably not objectively the best Super Nintendo game. I understand that. I understand that my opinion is colored by nostalgia. There's a lot of that. But I think objectively it is one of, if not the best looking games on the Super Nintendo in terms of the pre-rendered graphics style. The hybrid between the isometric 3D plane and the platforming mixed with the RPG mechanics really made it a very unique game and a unique Mario game. I love Mallow and Gino and all those unique characters. I want them to come back. That's always a big thing. I love the story in it. I love the tone. I love the music. Yoko Shimomura, this was really the game that... I would say this was really the game for her that made her career. And yeah, it's just... It had that kind of like Squaresoft at the time RPG epicness and a little bit of that darkness mixed with the, you know, the lighthearted Mario universe. You know, it just was a really cool blend that I think a lot of people, you know, at the time didn't really see coming. And it's just an amazing game, a game that I've gone back to a million times. For a long time, I played this game along with two others, which we'll talk about in a minute, once a year because I love the game so much. So yeah, Super Mario RPG is just my favorite game of all time. Another one that I'm just going to go on and on about right now, back to S tier, is Super Metroid. Super Metroid, as far as platformers go, again, like top 5 platformers for me. Greatest Metroidvania of all time. It was really the game that defined that genre. The music is one of the... It's, aside from, I think, maybe one other Super Nintendo soundtrack, my favorite soundtrack in any game of all time. I love that creepy sci-fi element to it. The story is simple enough, but also engaging enough where it's awesome. It's dark. It's, you know, it's creepy. You know, it's not... It's one of the best... It's also one of the best looking games in the Super NES, but unlike, I think, games like Super Mario RPG and Donkey Kong Country 2 and other games that kind of adopted that 3D, that pre-rendered 3D graphics sort of look towards the end of the Super NES's life, because Super Metroid kind of came out in the middle of the Super Nintendo's life, it still had the very, you know, the kind of sprite look to it, but the sprites are so detailed and the colors are crisp and the enemies are so well detailed, and like you look at something like Ridley or Kraid, those huge sprites that they made, and the environments and the music and the sound effects, like just everything about this game. It sets an atmosphere, it's got a tone, and just, I could go on and on about Super Metroid. In fact, this is one game I will say I kind of actually wish maybe I had put up a little higher on the list, because I find as the years go on, I just love the game more and more and more. And yeah, for me, it was the game that got me into the Metroid series, which is one of my favorite series of all time, video game series. So yeah, Super Metroid's got to be S tier. Actraiser, I'm going to give a B, and I've really not played through this game totally, so it's hard for me to be completely objective, but I have played enough of it a little bit where I can acknowledge how good it is. It's like a really cool kind of like RPG-ish, action RPG-ish kind of platformer game. Another classic Enix game, probably their most famous and most successful, one of them at least, for the Super Nintendo. Really interesting, like, unique game. The music was cool. I like the combat. It's also very unique. Just a cool game, but it's one that I gotta play more. I feel like this is one that when I when I go back to actually playing through it, it will definitely go up more in my list because I've been kind of slowly plucking away at the Enix games on my Super NES Classic because I want to do a project about those games at some point, a big video about that, kind of like a documentary. But Actraiser was a really early success for the Super Nintendo and kind of really kickstarted all those Enix games being published on the Super Nintendo. So really cool and unique game. I liked Actraiser. We have another Enix game here, which I'm going to go to A tier with, and that's Illusion of Gaia. I talked about this one on my Super NES Top 20 video. I'm actually currently playing through this game. I haven't played it in a few weeks, but it is the game that I'm currently working on my Super NES Classic, going through all these Enix games, or trying to very slowly. Illusion of Gaia is awesome. I said in the video that I think I like it more than Secret of Mana. I have more nostalgia and more of an attachment to the game. I think Secret of Mana probably is objectively better, or at least on par with it. But what I liked about Illusion of Gaia is that it kind of mixes, again, that RPG thing, but the combat and the dungeons is very Zelda-esque, where you can get different items and you kind of fight monsters with a sword in that kind of action RPG style. You kind of have to solve puzzles in the dungeon. It's a tough game in terms of like when you're actually doing the puzzles, but then the overworld map, you're talking to people, and there's some slight RPG mechanics and stuff in it, but it's much more of like an action-y RPG Zelda-esque game, or again, to probably more closely compare it to something like Secret of Mana. But it had such a unique idea with the world. It references a lot of things in history. Like at one point you go to some Incan ruins, and I know there's another point where you go to the pyramids. It's a really cool and unique game, and to me it's the best Enix game on the system that I've played so far. I mean, I haven't played Terranigma. I haven't gotten through all of Star Ocean yet. There's a few others that I can think of, but Illusion of Gaia is a stone cold classic in my opinion. Love that game. Played it, like, I think for the first time maybe a little bit before high school, early high school, something like that. So I was still pretty young when I played it. It had a really big impact on me, and I love it. I love the story, and it's a great game. Super Mario World, we're just gonna go right to another S tier here. Super Mario World, I mean, to me, is the greatest platformer of all time. I don't really need to go into it very much. You guys know, I don't think I need to tell anybody how great Super Mario World is. To me, it's the definitive classic Mario platformer. I know some people love Super Mario Bros. The most. I know some people love Super Mario Bros. 3 more, and some people even say stuff like Yoshi's Island, whatever. But Super Mario World was the game of my childhood in many ways. So many different levels, so many different secrets. It didn't have as many power-ups as Super Mario Bros. 3, but it had Yoshi, and the flutter jump really made it so flying was so much more of a, like, you could really just explore every inch of the level, and it was just just a great game, really impactful game for me. Game I've played at least 30 times, if not more. I mean, I've played this game, I don't know, tons and tons of times, and it never gets old. Bright and colorful, introduced Yoshi, Star World. I just love the game. It's fantastic, and the music too. That's the other thing. It's a great, awesome soundtrack. Next we have Chrono Trigger. Come on, guys, Chrono Trigger, contender for my favorite game of all time, to be honest. Just maybe slightly behind Super Mario RPG. Again, I could go on and on to keep it brief. The story deals with time travel, which I love anyway. And I love the characters. The writing is fantastic. The game just keeps going. It never lulls at all. I mean, it's cool. The fact that you hop back and forth through time, it makes it always exciting. One minute you're in the Middle Ages and you're trying to reforge the Mazimune. Then you're, in the prehistoric age looking for a precious stone. Then you're back to the Middle Ages and you gotta fight this evil magician vampire dude. And then you're thrown into, like, the past when magic ruled the world, and then you're thrown into the end of time in the future. It's a really, really exciting game. As far as a JRPG goes, it's probably one of the most accessible without sacrificing the challenge of the game, I think. And I loved you know, I love the double and triple techs, the way that is incorporated, how you can do different moves with different characters. Again, I love all the characters. They all have such great personalities, and they develop all the characters nicely. And yeah, I just love Chrono Trigger. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Oh, and it's when I was talking about music, my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. Love the Chrono Trigger soundtrack. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, I'm gonna give it a C. I don't have as much exposure to Super Ghouls and Ghosts as I do to other games of its ilk, like, for example, something like Super Metroid or Super Castlevania 4, or you know, other games like that. I like the game a lot. It's a pretty difficult game. It's unique. I like the kind of spooky, weird vibe of the game. It's a game that I need to play more, though, and I think even from what I've played of it, it's a great game, but I don't think it's just just a hair, or kind of like a step below games like Super Metroid and well, maybe a couple steps below Super Metroid, but like a step below something like Super Castlevania 4 or something like that. It's a cool game, like I said, but don't have a lot of exposure to it, but I still like it. So I'll give it like a C tier. Wild Guns is a cool game. I've played that one. I'm giving that one a B tier. Really cool, like Western shooter style game. I don't really know what to say about Wild Guns. It's really fun. And it's a game that I just would recommend people play. The controls in it are pretty interesting, and I don't know. I don't really know what to say about it. You got to really play Wild Guns to, I guess, fully experience it. It's a fun game. It's especially really fun playing two-player on that game. It's one of the coolest like co-op game, or not really co-ops, but like two-player games that you can play on the Super Nintendo. Okay, next up we got Final Fantasy III, also known as 6. That one's A tier for me. Now before you start screaming blasphemy at me, a couple things. First of all, Final Fantasy II, again, should be on here. I think I would put that A tier as well, maybe S tier. Final Fantasy III was also one I played later on, so again, it didn't have that childhood gut punch impact that other RPGs had. However, it is one of the best Final Fantasy games. The characters are really, really interesting. The world is interesting. Everything is kind of an upgrade from Final Fantasy II, although I personally like Final Fantasy II. Final Fantasy III is objectively the better game. The combat is a bit more, I guess, tightened up a bit. The graphics make the game look a bit more polished. I don't know, I really love the story in Final Fantasy III. It's another one like Chrono Trigger where it never gets boring. You know, one minute you're going up a mountain, and then you end up going down a raft, and you fight this octopus, and the group splits up, and then you're on a haunted train, and then, you know, you're at an opera, and then the main character, Terra, turns into an Esper, and it's just one of those, like, boom, 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 keeps throwing you into different scenarios. It's a really, really interesting game. It's a game I've never beaten, I have to say. It's a really long game, and it can get really difficult at times. I think that's partially why it's not as high up, because I'm quite frankly not very good at games, so I've never beaten it, and it's been frustrating for me before. But that being said, that doesn't take away from the impact that the game has had on me since, and I really, really do love Final Fantasy III. Fun fact, it's the first game I ever tried to do a Let's Play of on the channel, which was pretty interesting. I never finished it because my file got erased, but whatever. But it's a great game, one of the best Final Fantasies in my opinion. I'd say, honestly, like top 3 Final Fantasy games. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it that has already been said. It's just, for me personally, it's not S tier. It's not quite on the pedestal that everybody else puts it on, but I understand why people do. I mean, it really is a great game and a solid game. Mortal Kombat 2, I'm going to give it like a C tier. And in fact, is there any other Mortal Kombats on here? I don't think so, but I'd probably put them kind of under the same umbrella. Mortal Kombat's great, but it kind of suffers from the same thing that a lot of people claim Killer Instinct suffers from, where the arcade version is just better, and it's not really very structured well on the Super Nintendo controller. It's still fun. I've played it a bunch with friends, and it's always fun to button mash with your friends and play some Mortal Kombat for, you know, an hour or something. I enjoy the series a lot, but I'm also just not very good at Mortal Kombat again. So, but I don't know. I like the game. I like all three of them for the Super Nintendo. If I were to pick one, it would probably be the Ultimate Mortal Kombat for the Super Nintendo, because that's the one I probably played the most of. But, you know, solid game, but not super my cup of tea either. Street Fighter 2 Turbo, I will probably throw this one B tier. I like it more than Mortal Kombat. I'd say I like it maybe on par with something like Killer Instinct. But in fact, I think probably the controls are more solid than something like Killer Instinct. I think Street Fighter 2 is objectively the better game. The arcade version of I don't know why I keep saying of Street Fighter 2 Turbo, amazing. I love the arcade version of Street Fighter 2. It's probably the best port of a fighting game on the Super Nintendo, just because the controls are pretty good and graphically it looks really good. But yeah, when it comes to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or any fighting game like that, the arcade version's always superior, so I don't know. Again, probably objectively better than Killer Instinct, but Killer Instinct would be my vote. Aladdin, I'm gonna give Aladdin a B tier as well, but kind of like a high B tier. The reason is I didn't play it a ton as a kid. I've played a lot of it since. I really enjoy Aladdin. I played a bit with my wife. I know a lot of people say that the Sega Genesis version is superior. I don't know if I would agree with that, because I think that in terms of how it looks and how it plays, and the fact that Capcom developed the Super NES one, really is a big, in my opinion, like, favors heavily to the Super NES. But from what I've played of the Sega one, it's solid too, so I don't know. I love the level when you're trying to escape from the Cave of Wonders. That graphically looks really cool and is just really fun. But yeah, Aladdin's a super solid platformer. Honestly, it's better. It's better than it has any right to be, I would say. Actually, it's a very, very good game. Probably the best. I'd say probably the best Disney game on the console. Sure, I would go with that. Although Mickey's Magical Quest is a good game. UN Squadron. So I'm gonna put all of these as well. All these shooters on B tier. I'm just gonna make it really easy. Gradius 3 is great. So these ones, I have to say, I've been in a huge, like, old school shooter kick. I don't know what it is, both on the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. I love these old 16-bit shooters. They're so much fun. I didn't play a ton of any of these when I was a kid, but I've been really enjoying them lately. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, lately, anytime I turn on my Super NES Classic or my Sega Genesis Mini, both of which I've put a lot of these games on, I've been really enjoying them. And particularly Axelay, I've been playing a bunch of. Gradius 3, I really enjoy. I played a little bit of UN Squadron. I like that one too. I'd say I'd put Axelay and Gradius 3 above them, and Space Megaforce was good too. But man, those old school shooters, they're tough, but they're fun. And I've been really into Thunder Force 3 for the Sega Genesis, but that's a different story. I'd probably rank them here as you see them: Axelay, Gradius 3, Space Megaforce, UN Squadron, from what I've been playing of them. But I think Axelay takes the crown. I've really enjoyed Axelay. Solid shooter. Love how they look graphically. I love the music in all those games. There's nothing just about Super Nintendo music in general that I love. But yeah, you give me any one of these old shooter games, I'll play them. Like, I'll sit and play them for all day, because I love these old shooters. They're so much fun. Pilot Wings, I'm gonna give also a B tier. A lot of them in B tier. Pilot Wings is one I have for Super Nintendo. I played that one quite a bit, actually. Even when I remember playing that one at my cousin's house, actually, when I was little, and I really liked that game too. You'd think for like kind of like a flight simulator game, it wouldn't be as good as it is, but it really is that good. It's surprisingly fun trying to land planes and, you know, skydive and hit targets at a, you know, getting it just right, you know. getting the ascent and everything just right, and it's surprisingly difficult to land planes and get a good score too, but it's a game, whenever I put it on, I find myself surprisingly, like, I'll be playing it and like an hour has passed, and I'm like, where did that hour go? I'm just sitting here landing planes. I don't know. It's a fun game. Really, really, I think, innovative game for when it came out, because we're talking again sort of closer to early era, launch era. I don't remember if it was a launch title for the Super Nintendo, actually. I think it might have been, or close to launch, but I can imagine, like, when people first got their Super Nintendos back in like 91, 92, and they play this game, they're like, wow, this is really impressive, just how it looks and how it plays, and the controls are pretty solid. I don't know, for a flight simulating game, man, Pilot Wings is pretty awesome. Love that game. Super Mario Kart is, I am gonna give it A tier, because I kind of want to give it S tier, but I don't know. It's my favorite Mario Kart. I know a lot of people don't feel that way. They're not really, like, a lot of people say it's got its issues. I'm really good at Super Mario Kart. I love the game. Koopa Troopa's my boy. Love him. I always pick Koopa Troopa. I don't know. Fun tracks. Great music. Fun time. Beautiful. I'm trying to be quick now because I know I've been recording for a while here. Donkey Kong Country is also gonna get A tier. Great game, solid game, probably the most innovative game at the time when it came out. So far ahead of its time in everything, and graphically, musically. Some people claim that it sacrificed gameplay for graphics. I disagree with that, because especially if you get into the later stages in the game, it gets really difficult. Awesome game. Diddy's Conquest is superior to it, I think, in a lot of ways, but it's still a solid game, and awesome game. Again, contender for one of the best platformers of all time. And of course it kickstarted the Donkey Kong series. And can we be honest, aside from Nintendo, who else did platformers as well, aside from, like, who did platforms better than Rare, aside from Nintendo? You know, I don't know. That's my opinion, but whatever. Kirby Superstar, we're gonna give that one a solid A tier. It's like, what, 8 or 9 games or something in one. I love Kirby Superstar. It's probably my favorite Kirby game. I would also put Kirby's Dream Course in A tier, and I'd maybe put Kirby's Dream Land 3 like B tier, since they're not on here. But yeah, Dynablade, I love running through Dynablade. I love playing co-op with Kirby Superstar. It's really the first game that I can think of that I've ever played where you actually play co-op with 2 people in a platform game. It was really cool at the time. I remember first playing it with my friend Brian back in the day. We loved playing it. And I've played since with my brother a lot, with Walt a lot, and other people. And I don't know, I love Dynablade. I actually love the Gourmet Race a lot. It's really fun. The music is cool. It's bright and colorful. It's kind of accessible for people who aren't very good at games, which is appealing too. And yeah, I don't know. I love Kirby Superstar. It's a classic. Bomberman 2. I was playing a bunch of this a little while ago with my B for Bomberman, I guess, with my youngest brother and my niece and nephew, and this game's just fun. It's like, you gotta play it with multiplayer. If you play it by yourself, I'm not really the biggest fan of solo Bomberman, but this is a great game, especially multiplayer. And I don't know, if you got the multi-tap and you can play with 4 people, that's even better. It's one of the few games that use the multi-tap, and used it well, actually, I would argue. But yeah, Bomberman's just a fun time. It's a good, like, kind of party sort of game if you were to, say, have a multi-tap, or even if it's just you and a friend. Really cool, fun game. Doesn't have necessarily for me, like, it's not a game I'll play for a long time, but just to fire it up and play a few rounds, fun time. Bomberman's classic. Secret of Mana, I'm going to give an A tier to, but behind Illusion of Gaia, only because I haven't beaten it. But I've played it a bunch. This is one I also actually own the physical cartridge of. Love the game. It's a beautiful looking game, sprite-wise. It's a unique, it really is a unique idea, I think, the way, both in mechanics and just the story and everything. I love, you guys, some of you guys might have seen, I've actually streamed this with Dave and Walt on the channel, and since I have the multi-tap, I don't think any game does the multi-tap better than Secret of Mana. That game was meant to be played with 3 people, as far as I'm concerned. Once you play, I really think it's a huge, like, if you never get a chance to play Secret of Mana with 3 people, you're really missing out on a lot, because it's fun. Like, it's cool just like going on a quest together, and I don't know, when you fight the bosses and you have all 3 people trying to shuffle through and use their magic spells, and somebody's attacking with a sword, and you have the sprite attacking with a spear and stuff. Fun, like really, really fun. I love Secret of Mana. I love the story. I love the music a lot. Just a cool, unique game. Really, really awesome. Super Empire Strikes Back is on here, which I guess you could put the other Super Star Wars games, kind of lump those in. They're cool games. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. This is actually the one I had, was at Super Empire Strikes Back. Rachel has the other 2. So I've played all of them. They're good. They're very difficult games. Definitely not the easiest games, in my opinion, to get through. I've never beaten any of them. But I will say, like, they did a good job with the sprite work. The levels were unique. The music was cool. But the difficulty curve is just... they're difficult games, man. Like, I've never beaten one. I don't think I ever will, to be honest. But I appreciate the effort. They clearly did go through a lot of effort to make these games great, and I think they did a nice job. But yeah, for me, it's just they're really difficult. That's the big pitfall for me with the Super Star Wars series. But overall, still really good. Soul Blazer, this is one that I've played a bunch. This I'm going to go B tier, just slightly below. I love Soul Blazer. I've never finished it, unfortunately, but such a unique idea for a game, in my opinion. The idea that the actions you do in a dungeon affects the overworld, and you can unlock certain parts of the map in the overworld. It's really cool and well done. I don't know if the story is the most solid, but I also haven't gotten super far in the game, so it's hard to give it a truly objective, you know. Again, this is another one that I'm going to be revisiting with some of these Enix games that I've been playing, but it's hard to be truly objective with it because I haven't played through the game. But what I've played of the game, I've really loved. I think the game plays really well and is a unique idea, and I just admire Enix during this time with all the different things they tried. And some worked, some didn't, but Soul Blazer was definitely a big win as far as I'm concerned, even just from the little I've played of it. Super Castlevania 4 is definitely A tier, a very difficult game, very, very difficult, but also a really solid game. I love Super Castlevania 4. I actually did beat it with Dave, I think like a year or 2 ago, and we had a great time. The sprite work in this game is amazing. The atmosphere is, like, can only be... It rivals games like Super Metroid and Donkey Kong Country 2 just for the atmosphere of the game. It's really creepy at times, spooky. Some of the detailed sprite work is really impressive. I absolutely love the music. It's some of my favorite music on the Super Nintendo. And it's just a solid Castlevania. It's one of my favorite Castlevania games that I've played. Absolutely love Super Castlevania 4. If you haven't played it, it really is a must. And if you're more of a fan of those old school Castlevanias rather than the Castlevania, like the Metroidvania style Castlevanias, this is to me the crown jewel. Some people might say Dracula's Curse, some people might say Bloodlines, some people might say Rondo of Blood. For me, it's Super Castlevania 4. Love the game, so well made. Earthbound is S tier. I could go on and on about Earthbound, but an attempt to try to make this go somewhat faster. Yeah, Earthbound, great game, zany, weird, huge game in my childhood. No other game like it. It has a cult following for a reason. Love the music. The combat's unique. The story is so weird and so great. Also, again, kind of how I described with Chrono Trigger, just kind of all over the place, but it always kind of keeps you guessing when you first play it, and some of the dialogue is hilarious. Some of the stuff that Shigesato Itoi wrote in the script was just genius, and probably the creepiest final boss fight ever. Earthbound, amazing, you gotta play it. So we're gonna try to kick it in overdrive here. Starfox, I'm gonna give A tier. Amazing game. A game I've actually played quite a lot in recent years. One I've also never beaten, but man, as far as ambitious goes, you can't get much more ambitious than Starfox in terms of Super NES games. Graphically, yes, it looks kind of dated now, but man, at the time, it must have boggled the mind to people when they saw it for the first time, because they essentially tried to make a 3D game with the Super Nintendo. Does it now kind of look weird and sort of clunky? Sure. But it still plays great. The controls feel really good, and it's just it's a blast. I love Starfox. Amazing game. NHL 95, really good game actually. I'm not a big sports fan, but from what I've played of this, I've really enjoyed it. I like hockey games. They're really fun, particularly ice hockey on the NES. But I played this a few times. I think my cousin had this one. It was either this or 94, I don't remember, but we'll lump the NHL games kind of together. I do actually enjoy a few sports games from time to time, but the crown jewel really is, and I'll put it in B tier for me, has got to be NBA Jam. NBA Jam is just a fun game, probably the best sports game I've ever played. I love how you can perform the dunks and stuff in it. It's fun to play against people. It's pretty hilarious to play as Bill Clinton. It's kind of a random addition to NBA Jam. But yeah, awesome, cool basketball game. Love it. Mega Man X for me is B tier. Blasphemy, you may shout. I'm going to be straight with you people. I'm not a big Mega Man fan. I don't know what it is about that series. I don't know, again, if I'm just not a very good gamer or something, but I can never get very far in this game. I find this game kind of frustrating sometimes, but I do like it. I like again, the graphic style is amazing, the music is amazing, the controls are really tight and very good. I think one thing I don't like about Mega Man games, and maybe I just haven't gotten far enough in some of the later ones, is how slow you move. Now, I know what you're going to say. Castlevania is like that too, you move very slow, but there's something about Castlevania's controls and world that is more appealing to me, and I just think works better than Mega Man. That being said, Mega Man X is a great game. It's the best Mega Man game that I've played, and just solid. It is a good game, but for me, it's just not, like, the Mega Man series as a whole has never been something that I've been huge into, and that's gonna go to, unfortunately, for the other Mega Man X games as well. I'll put them here as well. I've played a little bit of Mega Man X2, I think that's what this one is, and I have not played Mega Man X3, but same deal. Mega Man X2 seems like a better game from what I've seen. I watched shout out to JRPG Gaming play this on his channel, and it looked awesome when he was playing it, but I guess I'm just ass at Mega Man games, guys. I don't know, but I will acknowledge that they're objectively good games, so you know, I don't know what else to say aside from that. Turtles in Time, one of the greatest beat-em-up games of all time. I would argue probably the best beat-em-up game of all time. I'm giving that one an A tier because nothing better in this world than sitting with a good buddy, just beating the crap out of, you know, Shredder's army and all those bad guys, and having a nice little Ninja Turtle romp through time. Love it. Spent countless long nights playing with friends, from our good buddy Bacon Mob to my brother-in-law Dan. Love playing Turtles in Time. It's classic. And the arcade version's even better. But the Super NES version is also really solid. Love that game. F-Zero, I'm giving it C tier. Again, you may shout blasphemy. Where's two-player? That's my huge problem with F-Zero. It's a good enough racing game, it's decent. Graphically, it looks cool. A lot of people say it's better than Super Mario Kart. I totally disagree. There's no two-player. Like, that's my big problem with F-Zero. Are the controls cool? Is the idea unique? Are the graphics nice and crisp and awesome? Yes. Is the music good? Yes. But Like, in a racing game, how do you not have two-player? I don't know. That's my main beef with F-Zero. I think, again, it's an objectively good game, but that's a big, like, miss to me. I just don't understand how you don't have two-player in a racing game like that. It's just beyond me. I don't know. Earthworm Jim, I'm gonna give a B tier. It's actually really fun on the Sega too. I haven't played a ton of this. It's a cool platformer. It's weird. I remember the show growing up. I never played this game a ton. I played it more on the Sega though, because my cousin had it on the Sega. So my experience with the Super Nintendo version isn't as, I guess, thorough or whatever you would say, as extensive, I guess, as the Super Nintendo. But it's essentially the same kind of game. Interesting, unique game, but to me, kind of an average platformer, I would say. Demon's Crest, this one is one that I'm putting up on B tier. It's one I haven't played a ton of, but I've played this one recently, and it is a really interesting game. Such a cool idea to play as a demon, and you know, it has this like really cool looking overworld, and the whole dark tone of the game. And the first thing you do when you play the game is you face this huge dragon that chases you down. And, such a cool game, unique concept, a game that I want to play more of. I'm not as exposed to it as I should, but man, Demon's Crest is a really cool game. It's one that I've got to play more, but from what I've played, I've really liked. It's a very unique platformer. I think this one, for me, has a potential to get up there with the Super Castlevania 4s and Super Metroids of that ilk, but, really interesting and unique game, Demon's Crest. I like it a lot. Secret of Evermore, I'm going to give a C tier. I like the story from what I've played of it. I like the combat. It's very similar to Secret of Mana in that sense. I played a bunch of that actually about a year ago with Dave. Man, it's a difficult game. It can be brutal sometimes, and I don't think it's nearly as solid as Secret of Mana. I wish they had like at least given the option for two-player if they weren't going to have 3 characters to play as, like in Secret of Mana, because it'd be cool to play as the dog, you know? I don't know. But I like that, like, the characters always referencing, like, old cheesy sci-fi movies and monster movies and stuff, which is kind of funny. The story seemed interesting, but I just couldn't really get past the first part of the game. It's really difficult, and I hate to say it, but for me personally, like, if a game is really difficult, like impossibly difficult, sometimes the frustration sort of takes away from the rest of the game. So I don't know. For me, it's a good game from what I've played of it, but it's not quite for me, I would say. I actually don't know what this is, so we're gonna put that in haven't played. Oh, R-Type 3. That was another one I've played, another shooter. I'm gonna throw that with the rest of the shooters. Again, solid. I don't really have anything else to say about it. I recall liking this one, I think, more than... I think I'll actually put this one behind Axelay, because I actually think because I played all of these recently together, so they're kind of becoming a blur, but yeah, R-Type 3, I think, was actually a pretty good game. Contra 3, The Alien Wars, I'm gonna give C tier. Again, suffers kind of from the same thing as Secret of Mana. The Contra series is really cool, and I like it, but God, is this game impossibly difficult. I can never get past the same boss. I've played this game, I've tried playing this game, I can't tell you how many countless times, even with save states, I just can't do it. Why you'd have a game where you just die by getting hit once, I don't understand, but man, this game is just really frustrating. It's a well-made game, it looks awesome, the music is cool, but man, I'm sorry, not for me. I can't do a game that impossibly hard. Tetris Attack, for me, is an A tier game. Best puzzle game on the Super NES, in my opinion. Really unique. It's also known as Panel du Pon for you Japanese players. I like the Tetris Attack version because it's got Yoshi's, which I think is a cooler theme, versus like the kind of generic anime style. But hey, everybody has their, their preferences. But I think if you get to the core gameplay, which is where the game really matters, it's just really fun. It's a really fast-paced, cool version. Like, not even really of, like, the name Tetris Attack is actually kind of deceiving because it's a lot different than Tetris. But, I don't know what to say. It's really fun, and I love playing multiplayer with it. Zombies Ate My Neighbors. This is a game that I wish I had put on this list, because this is on my top 20 Super NES games list, because this is a A-tier game, especially with a friend. Playing one of the best two-player games for the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. It's just a cool, like, overhead, top-down kind of shooter sort of game. Really unique style to it. Konami, I think, really knocked it out of the park with this one. I know the rights to it are kind of like weird now, because I don't know if LucasArts owns it now or whatever, so the game's kind of been in limbo for a long time. But man, Zombies Ate My Neighbors, what a solid, unique game. It's really fun to play with two players. And I just love like how cheesy it is. It references this sort of same thing that I was talking about with Secret of Evermore, of just, you know, cheesy old horror flicks, and it has a lot of those tropes in it. Just a cool game, fun, action-packed, and you want a good, like, solid couple of hours of fun, just play Zombies Ate My Neighbors with a friend. It's a really good time. Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie's Double Trouble. I will give it B tier, but high B tier. Probably the weakest of the 3 Donkey Kong Country games, but it's still a really great game. I love it. I don't like the overworld map. They kind of made it a bit convoluted. I thought it was perfect in Donkey Kong Country 2. And the soundtrack isn't quite as good as the first or the second games. But man, like, there's some really unique level designs in that game. For like a really late end-of-life game for the Super Nintendo, it's super solid. They really didn't skimp on making it a good game. I actually like playing as Kiddy Kong. He's pretty interesting. And I don't know what to say. It can get really difficult at times. The Lightning Lookout level destroys my soul. But it's a great game. I've played through it a couple times now, and I always enjoy going back to it. Again, not as solid as the other two, but still a solid game. Super Punch-Out. It's gonna be my D tier one, and hear me out on this. I'm not a fan of the Punch-Out games. I'm sorry. Like, it's a good game, but first of all, the first Punch-Out is a better game, and I think the graphics, while they look pretty good, I don't really like the art style, and I don't know. I'm just not a fan of Super Punch-Out, so sorry to you Super Punch-Out fans. I don't know what else to say. Just not really my game. Super Mario All-Stars is S tier. Probably the game that got me into games, really, to be honest. Always been a huge fan of Super Mario All-Stars. As I said in that video, to me, that's the definitive versions of the first 3 Super Mario Bros. Games, and the Lost Levels too. Just love how the games. I feel like the controls are a little tighter. The graphics are crisper. The music's better. They took the first 3 Mario games and, like, just upped the quality and tightened everything up, and it was great. I know a lot of people missed some of the glitches, particularly from the first game. I know that, you know, some people say that the NES versions are better. Hey, you know what? To each their own. I'm sure that they both have their strengths and weaknesses, but to me, and maybe it's just a bias in terms of, like, the games, like, you know, my exposure to the games, but this was the first, really, this compilation of games was the first, I guess, game cartridge that I ever, like, really loved and got into, that got me into video games. So that and Super Mario World are really the two games that got me into video games. So there's that kind of, like, rose-colored glasses kind of bias to it, but I think objectively they're great versions of those games. I mean, come on. I don't think they look better than, you know, than in this collection. So, I don't know. Awesome. Always loved playing those classic Mario games, and who doesn't, really? Okay. Sunset Riders, I've really not played very much of, so I'm actually going to throw this in the haven't played section, because I'm hard-pressed to give an objective opinion on it, so I'm going to put it there. For the last game, the final game, for the tier list, we have Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, one of my absolute favorite platformers of all time. Introduced, like, the concept of Yoshi having his own game. It had, you know, introduced Baby Mario, which, well, yeah, maybe that isn't a plus for it, but anyway. Cool, like, pastel, kind of colored in sort of art style, very kind of cutesy, but works really well. The way that they kind of utilize the Mode 7 in certain ways on the game is really interesting. Particularly with those like spinning platformy things. I don't know, love it. Love the soundtrack. Love the art style. It's one of the most fun platformers I've ever played. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's one of the prettiest, it probably is the prettiest game on the Super Nintendo. And I think one of the most unique graphically, I would say, on the Super Nintendo too. And I think it holds its own right up against the best Mario platformer games. Absolutely. And it launched the Yoshi series as a franchise, which, hey, that's another bonus. I love the Yoshi series. So yeah, don't know what else to say about Yoshi's Island. It's pretty much a perfect game, except for the horrendous baby crying when you lose Baby Mario, but I digress. Yoshi's Island, awesome game. Awesome, awesome game. Top tier. So there you have it. That was a bit long, but so maybe it's good that they didn't have every game that I wanted on here. But some, like I said, big omissions. Final Fantasy II, I'd probably put that A tier. Those other Kirby games. We're missing some puzzle games. I personally like Wario's Woods a lot. I know they're missing some other games, but I'm kind of blanking out right now on what some of the other ones are. Oh, something like Star Ocean, some of those other Enix games they're missing. I don't know what else. Maybe comment below if you guys can think of anything else. But that's it, guys. That's my tier list. That is, as far as at least what this list is showing. That is my tier list of Super NES games. How did I do? Do you guys agree with me? You guys think I'm full of crap? Let me know. If there's any games here I'm missing that you want to know what my opinion is of them, just put it in the comments below. And thanks everybody for watching, and if you guys enjoyed this, maybe I'll do another tier list. Maybe I'll do the N64 or something like that. But until next time, peace guys. Later.